Hey guys, what is going on? So today I wanted to talk about a blood test that I got done pretty recently and go over my results on that test, break down all the numbers, what's optimal, what's not. And I do plan to get regular blood work from here on out as well. I found a pretty cost-effective method that I can do that consistently, and so that's something that I'm planning to do here moving forward. Now, this is not a comprehensive panel that shows everything under the sun, is going to show like if I'm natural or not. I haven't had anybody question my natural status for like 4 years or something. So I don't think anybody's really concerned about that, but I do plan to have a very productive year of training over the next year. I think I'm in a really good spot to kind of continue to make progress from where I'm currently at. And so maybe I will get an accusation or two over the next year, and then maybe I'll do like a more comprehensive panel. But as of now, I just have these kind of semi-regular blood tests that I'm planning on doing, and I want to go over my results with you guys here. If you're not interested in something like this, then, I guess I just won't continue to update, but I still probably will continue to get these just to track my overall health. So these are test results from July 12th. I think it's the 21st today. And of the tests that I took, of the things that they tested, 31% of the tests that I did, I'm in the optimal range, 64% I'm in the average range, and then 5% is caution. And so I'll talk about, that's just one individual thing, and I'll talk about that in a second. My biological age, I don't even know how they determine this, but it says it is 3 years and 2 months younger than my actual age, which is, I don't really buy that, good or bad. I just think that's kind of whatever. But I want to talk about the main kind of hormone stuff first. Is probably the numbers that are the most interesting. And kind of the reason I wanted to take this test is that I did actually do, maybe a couple years ago, a year or two ago, I can't remember, I did a saliva test. And and one reason I did this is because I felt like I maybe had some out of whack hormones. And so this didn't actually test my total testosterone, but it did test my free testosterone and my estradiol, both of which were elevated. And at the time I was on finasteride. Since then, I've actually come off finasteride, and so I've had a little bit of an interest in hormones recently, because as I am lowering my DHT, or as I was lowering my DHT, that elevated my estradiol and my free testosterone, which makes sense when I took that saliva test. Now that I'm not on finasteride anymore, I wanted to get a blood test and see like where I'm actually at, and then continue to see that progress. So this measured estrogen, SHBG, total testosterone, free testosterone, all of which are average in the normal range. So this is a very good sign for me. I felt like I had symptoms of high estrogen when I was on finasteride, and due to the like higher free testosterone, higher aromatization into estrogen, that tracks. And so the fact that I'm not on finasteride now, and I haven't been for multiple months at this point, to see that estrogen come back down into a normal range is good. And that's something that I've actually been really striving to do. I've been wanting to lower my estrogen. So it is currently 18.73. I think it's picograms per milliliter is what this unit is, but it's PG over ML, 18.73. My SHBG is also in the normal range. And when I say normal range, I'm just referring to what this thing is giving me. I have no idea what normal ranges are for anything other than like testosterone. So just take the number that I say, and if it's within the actual normal range, that's up for debate on what the ranges actually are. My SHBG is 53.9 nanomoles per liter. I believe that's the unit. And these are both, every one of these is not in the optimal range. They're just in the average range. So there is potentially room for improvement for all of these. Probably the most interesting number is my total testosterone, which is 537 nanograms per deciliter, which I consider that to be actually quite average. Generally, I think the range is like 250 to 900 is the normal range. But considering I'm like kind of smack in the middle of that, makes it feel like it is truly average. And so I'm totally fine with that. I have no reason to feel like I need 1,000 nanogram per deciliter test level. I wouldn't be surprised if I've had much higher testosterone than this in the past, considering, being on finasteride, or even like my free test being very high. In the past, I had taken like testosterone boosters and stuff like that, which some people think they don't work. I personally do think they work, and I'll talk about that in a second. But 537 is, I have no issue with this whatsoever. I wouldn't necessarily try to increase this for the sake of it, and I'm totally fine with that. And then my free testosterone is 83.68 picograms per milliliter, which is kind of, as far as like the normal range that all these show, that's kind of the lowest. And so that is probably the thing that I'd want to bring up the most. So total testosterone, I'm not super concerned about one way or another. Free testosterone, I would prefer to be higher, but at the same time, I don't want any excess aromatization into estradiol or estrogen or whatever. And so that's kind of the main thing. Is I do feel like I had side effects of having higher estrogen, and when I did get that test, that kind of confirmed that. But my free testosterone was also higher. So ideally, I'd have a higher free testosterone to be able to take advantage of the benefits of that without elevating my estrogen too much. So that's kind of what I would prefer. How much these things are interrelated and how I can change them, I don't know quite that much about it, but that is something that I will be keeping my eye out for, is potentially increasing that free testosterone without seeing too big of an increase in estrogen. And if we compare these numbers, like the sliding scale, my estrogen is relatively the highest on these scales, followed by SHBG, followed by total test, followed by free testosterone. So I kind of would prefer if that inverted and went the other way. And that's something that I'm going to be working on moving forward here. Now, my testosterone to estrogen ratio is actually in the optimal range, which is 28.67. I don't know if that kind of stuff differs, depending on what units you use or whatever. The next ones, these are things that I really don't know much about in terms of, because I've never gotten these tested in the past, but they're all in the average range. So my ferritin is 150.2 nanograms per milliliter. My triglycerides are 31 milligrams per deciliter. My vitamin D is 40.92 nanograms per milliliter. And then my free T3 is 2.98 picograms per milliliter. So those, again, are all in the average range. Some of them are, like my ferritin is just outside of like the optimal range. My triglycerides could be a little higher in terms of being like in the optimal range, but everything's kind of firmly in that optimal range. In that normal range. Now my optimal numbers are my albumin, which is 4.1 grams per deciliter. That's just in that optimal range. So I'm on the lower end of like the optimal range. And then my triglycerides to HDL ratio, I should go back to the albumin because if it's optimal, that's, so that is fluid balance. It says on this, I actually don't know much about any of these things other than like the hormones, but it says it's a protein produced by the liver, essential for maintaining fluid balance in the bloodstream and transporting nutrients, hormones, and drugs throughout the body. So this seems like obviously very ideal. If I can efficiently transport nutrients and if my hormones are in a good range and they can be transported throughout the body, obviously that's something that I like. So the fact that that is in the optimal range is very encouraging. But again, it's just in that optimal range. Now the triglycerides to HDL ratio, basically like the very low end, like everything on the low end is optimal. And I'm like pretty far towards like the low end of that. So this is actually like very firmly in that optimal range, at least according to this. And again, that's 0.56 milligrams per deciliter. So if I go into what that means, it says the ratio provides an at-a-glance indication of metabolic health and cardiovascular risk. So higher ratios, which is not something I have the lower ratio. Higher ratios often correlate with greater insulin resistance, poor blood sugar control, and less favorable lipid profile. So I would essentially be the exact opposite of that according to this. Lower ratios are linked to better metabolic flexibility and cardiovascular well-being. So a couple of things that I've been doing recently that I think may be contributing to this is I've been on a higher carb diet and lower fat. And I think that is probably what I want to do moving forward. So I've been doing that, which I think is helping with that insulin sensitivity aspect. And I'm very thrilled. That's one of the main things I've been trying to do recently. So the fact that that is like my best number out of all of these is really good. Also, I've been doing the sauna after every gym session. And I read some research that suggests that pairing weight training with a sauna is like, it's like a 1+1 = 3 effect for kind of like heart health, cardiovascular stuff. And I just never really considered saunas. I haven't had access to a sauna until this year, like on a regular basis. And I'm going to be moving here soon, and I think I will have access to the sauna in my new gym. But if I don't, I honestly would consider having a home sauna now that I've grown accustomed to using it. I think it's just been like this really kind of eye-opening experience using it after every gym session. I really like it, and it feels like I just like I'm getting a lot healthier, it feels like. So having that triglyceride to HDL ratio in that range, I hope that what this is saying is actually accurate. But if that's a really good number, I think maybe the diet and the sauna are, things that are making that happen. And then creatinine is also in the optimal range, which it's getting on the higher end. So of the optimal range, it's kind of in that higher optimal range. This actually surprised me because I've been kind of mega dosing creatine depending on how much I can get in. I try to get about 10 grams a day on average, but some days I can even go above that. Now, recently I've been slacking a little bit, but I do still get more than 5 grams a day for sure. But I would have figured, considering not only do I take creatine, but I take a pretty large dose of that, I would imagine my creatinine levels would be elevated. The fact that they're not, hopefully that's really good. They are in the optimal range. Oh, the number is 1.06 milligrams per deciliter. So again, all of these numbers, these ranges, the only one that I actually know of, like what is the normal range, is testosterone. Every other one I'm just going based off of the numbers that they're giving me. And then my heart health thing. So the one cautionary number that I have is APOB, and it is 93.13 milligrams per deciliter, which is kind of on the lower end of like the scary range. And so I've never heard of this until now. But it says it is the structural protein found on all, these are a lot of big words, but anyway, a whole bunch of big words and crazy stuff. Each of these particles carries exactly one APOB molecule, which means your APOB level reflects the total number of potentially artery clogging particles circulating in your bloodstream. So that sounds really scary. Obviously, I'm going to be on the lookout for that. Now, one thing that I have had in the past that I kind of got out of the habit of taking is nattokinase. And I'm speculating that taking nattokinase is going to be beneficial for kind of clearing that out. Now, as far as how do I improve with this, there's something that, on the test shows, like what are things that you can do? Well, nutrition, it talks about some of those things. I don't think I'm doing anything poorly on the nutrition aspect of it. It talks about doing exercise, which I obviously do, stress management. But really, in terms of things that I could do from a supplementation standpoint, omega-3 fatty acids via fish oil. So that is something that I was really, really good about fish oil kind of like earlier this year. And then I kind of fell off a little bit. So ever since I took this test, I've been upping my fish oil dose and being a lot more consistent with it. So I'm hoping that's going to be beneficial. Fiber is another one. So fiber, it's not something that I am super strict about, but I'm trying to like keep that in the back of my mind. Like, I should increase my fiber intake. So that's something I'm considering. Adaptogens, this is something that is just like, I consider this to be like mushrooms. So I've been supplementing with Gorilla Shroom recently. It's something that I used to use very consistently, but I've just kind of gotten out of the habit of being really dialed in with my supplementation. So I'm going to be throwing those in. Another one they mentioned is berberine, which can be beneficial for like insulin sensitivity and stuff like that. I probably am not going to go out and like buy berberine anytime soon, but that is something that I will keep in the back of my mind. And then protein, prebiotics, probiotics. So I am just going to be probably upping the omega-3s via the fish oil, introducing adaptogens on a more consistent basis, and then just keeping in the back of my mind having fiber. Those three things plus the nattokinase, that's going to kind of be my bread and butter for bringing that down. So that's kind of the plan that I have for that. And then the rest of the things I have, my HDL, LDL, and then my LDL APOB ratio. So HDL is 55 milligrams per deciliter. It's kind of like, I would like that to be a little bit higher. So that's the good cholesterol. It's kind of right on that verge of being in the optimal range. So I would like to improve that. And so as far as like improving that, It says nutrition, exercise, stress management supplements. So as far as supplements, omega-3, fiber, berberine, protein, adaptogens. So that's kind of the same thing. Hopefully we'll be bringing up my LDL while bringing down my APOB. LDL cholesterol, it's kind of towards the middle, but on a little bit more of the higher end of that range. So I'd like to bring that down a little bit, which I would imagine same idea here. It's 116.80 milligrams per deciliter. And then my LDL to APOB ratio is 1.25, which is nearing that range of not being in the good category, but it's actually just in the average category. So if I could bring that up, that would be bringing up LDL or bringing down APOB. So if I bring up my LDL, which that's like the bad cholesterol, so that's not really something that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get that a little bit more in the middle ground. So essentially bringing that that APOB down hopefully will be beneficial for that. I'm not entirely sure how those two things are interrelated. Maybe I entirely butchered how that ratio changes, but considering that's in the normal range, I'm not as concerned about that as just bringing my APOB down. And then I have one more optimal, which is, this is very similar to the triglycerides to HDL ratio, which the lower the better it seems. And the optimal range is on that really low end, which is CRP, C-reactive protein, which is an inflammation indicator. Mine is 0.3 milligrams per liter. And so what is it? It is an acute phase reactant produced by the liver in response to inflammation or tissue injury. Elevated CRP levels, which is not what I have, indicate an ongoing inflammatory process. And then the lower CRP level, which is what I do have, generally suggests lower systemic inflammation, correlating with healthier recovery, metabolic balance, and reduced long-term disease risk. So I've always felt like my recovery is extremely good. Anytime I track my HRV, which this watch is supposed to, but the feature is not out yet, which is super annoying. But I've had HRV trackers in the past, and that's one way that you can kind of measure your like readiness score, like Whoop does that, or just general ability to recover. I think HRV is one of the ways you can measure that. I've always had extremely high HRV, so I just feel as if that plus the CRP number and just the general ability to recover is one reason why I historically have always been like really able to tolerate volume. I used to do very, very, very high volume in the past, and now I'm coming back from a period of doing low volume, and I think that's improving my lifts and everything like that. So that is every metric that I have. Hopefully the numbers that they're giving me and the ranges are actually accurate, and I'm not just saying a bunch of dumb stuff that doesn't actually apply. But kind of the takeaway from this is I'm pretty happy with what I've been doing. So as far as improving numbers, just increasing my omega-3 levels, having higher fiber intake, introducing adaptogens on a regular basis as just doing it every now and then, which is how I've been doing it. And then nattokinase, specifically for the APOB, I think based on my understanding of it, that should be beneficial. Now, if I'm totally off on that, then you guys can let me know. But that's kind of my understanding of it. And then the one thing, there's two things that I've been doing. One, I've been doing this even prior to taking this test. I've been trying to increase my DHT kind of back to like a baseline level. So I have been taking multiple supplements that hopefully will be bringing my DHT back up to where it kind of should be. Because as I got off finasteride, I have been, reading a little bit about how your ability to produce DHT after being on finasteride for a while can be diminished. I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but I would like to kind of just get back to my baseline levels before I ever started finasteride, and kind of get rid of potentially like some of the side effects that I got from that and kind of bring the DHT back up to a normal range. So that is something that I'm doing multiple supplements to bring that DHT back. Now that is not actually directly tested on this test, but I couldn't really find a ton of options when it came to DHT testing for like an affordable price. So I just kind of went with the one that I got. So I have been doing that, and that is something that, again, I was doing prior to getting this blood work. And the thing that I've added since getting this blood work is Sigma from Gorilla Mind. So that is something that in the past I noticed when I was taking that, I felt as if my testosterone was elevated, but I also think that potentially contributed to those higher estradiol numbers because I was lowering my DHT, I was increasing my free testosterone and the aromatization into estradiol, which I did not want. So I stopped taking testosterone boosters entirely. I stopped taking Sigma. I stopped taking any of that stuff when I noticed I was getting that excess aromatization. Now that my estrogen is back in a normal range, I think I can reintroduce Sigma and see what happens. Now, if my estradiol shoots through the roof after that, then I'll probably discontinue. But if my estradiol stays in a normal range and my free testosterone, total testosterone are elevated, that is probably good not only for just general well-being, but also if I'm trying to increase my DHT back to baseline levels, then that should be beneficial in that regard. Now, if my hair just completely falls out after doing this, then who knows what I'll do in that situation. I've kind of accepted that it's not really worth staying on finasteride in my scenario. I don't really think it's worth it. I may end up going like the hair transplant route, and that may change things. But as of now, I'm just not that concerned about the side effects of having higher DHT, and I kind of just want to get back to like a baseline level. I'm not entirely convinced that I have a reason to lower my DHT. I'm not sure if that's even all that effective for me personally on a genetic level, but I'm still kind of agnostic about it all. I'm not like pro finasteride or anti finasteride, but I do feel like since I came off it, and if I did have side effects from taking it over multiple years, I would just like to return to a baseline that I've been at previously and see if that is better or worse than the alternative that I kind of was dealing with prior to that. So again, not entirely like trying to do a specific thing and saying that's the best route. I'm just experimenting a little bit, seeing what will happen, and hopefully that ends up being good for, you know, my hormonal profile in general, and hopefully my hairline doesn't get destroyed in the process of doing that. But if it does, I guess maybe that's just the route I'm supposed to take, and I'm going to be bald or something like that. I don't know, but anyway, that's all I got to say about that. I'll keep you updated, and I'll talk to you soon.